Okay, here I'm gonna go straight to startbase command and then we'll probably build it up. So type cmd startbase. Okay, now before startbase you want to check a few things. For example, the player label. If the player is not admin, then he shouldn't be able to start base, for example. So if output 1 less than 1, so that anyone with admin level 1 or above can start a base. Need to be higher admin level, for example. You also need to make a variable, call it allow start base equals true. So if allow start base is equal to false, now for example, if you want the base to start after some time, just like I did soon, so when someone dies, they can spawn in the base properly. Because if you don't put a timer in here, you start a base, if someone is dead, they won't spawn in the base, or they won't spawn properly. So you can give it a time, and within that time you don't want this command to work. So you don't want another base to start at the same time. That's why I have this variable now, allow start base equals false. So if allow start base is false, then you can say something like please wait. And here we need one more variable to save our round base ID. Okay, so now I have current as -1. So when you start your script, the current base ID will be -1. Now type if current isn't equal to -1, then
Beast entered channel.
so if one sec. So if there's a round going on, if the round ID, if the base ID is not equal to -1, which means if there is round going on already, then you can say or round is in progress. For it to end. A round is in progress, please wait for it to end, or something like that. Now type if isn't is null, for example, if is null, params. So if the player did not put anything after start base, then you can probably show them what the command does. So the command is start base and then base ID. If isn't is numeric, So if the player parameter is something, if it's not numbers, then send them an error message saying base ID can only be numerical. You can also have something in here like if isn't is numeric params, and then you can check if the player put start base previous, for example, or last, spacebar last, start base last. Then you can make it so it starts the previous base if there was any previous base. That's a good idea. I saw it in the new game mode that was recently posted in the GTA media. So now you get the base ID, new base ID equals strval params. So you convert whatever you put after this into a numerical value and you save it in base ID. So now you have your base ID. Now you need to check if that base exists. So first of all, if the base ID is bigger than max bases. If you don't put this line, you will get an error if someone puts a very large number. Also, you don't get an error normally like this. To get an error, you need to use crash detect, which is another plugin, but I'm not gonna go into that now. So just type if base ID is bigger than max bases, then send the player message that base does not exist, for example. Again, now type if, because this will check if your base ID was bigger than max bases. So for example, our max bases is 150. If you start a base, start base for example 200, then you will get this message. But at the same time, there may be that you don't have, for example, base 3. You have all other bases, but you don't have base 3. So you need to run another check on that as well. We already have the variable. It's called bExist. So we're saying if it does not exist, if the base does not exist, if isn't bExist base ID, it checks for that base. Then again, send them the same message that the base does not exist. Now we are ready to start our base. You can now type allow start base equals, by the way, this should be true. No, this is false. Yeah, that's fine. Type allow start base equals false, because you want to prevent the base from starting during this time when the base starts. And after that, once the base starts, then our base ID will be current. So this current will be our base ID, and it won't be equal to -1. So the player won't be able to start the base anyways. But for now, our current is still -1. So we need this variable to prevent the player from starting the base again on top of another base. So type allow start base equals false, and then make a timer. Set timer ex. Type on base start. I usually use 4 seconds, so you might want to put 4000 milliseconds, and then you don't want the timer to repeat, so that I will leave it at false. And then you transfer the base ID as well, because base ID is numerical. I put I or D. You can put D as well, and then base ID. Then type return 1 and close brackets. You can also send a message saying who started the base and all that. So tab new string 160 maybe, see if it's enough. Format string size of string and your message. So I'm gonna copy the message from here with the same colors and everything. Okay, so this player has started base, the base name and then the base ID. So player ID name, the name of the base. Remember we had a variable for that, being name, base ID, and base ID itself. Because the name and base name are not numerical, you put S for string, and base ID is numerical, you can just put D. Now you can send client message to all. The color you can put the color as -1 because it will just ignore this color since we already used colors in here. And then you can put string. Alright, so this is it now. There should be two equal signs. One equals means that this value is equal to this. If you're using if case, then you should use two equal signs, because now we are saying if this is equal to this. We're not saying this should be equal to this. Okay, another error. Alright, because this have a true and false value, this should be bool. Yes, brackets like this. Alright, now we have our base command, but this won't do anything. Now if you go to server types, start base and start a base, it will just tell you that this player started this base, and it won't do anything after 4 seconds because we haven't done anything on base start.